Baller Papa, swing! Eldlich Mama, swing! I have no idea what they were on, but we take those because Branded Eldlich to Diamond 1. It went without a hitch. Absolutely no multiple losses to our Diamond 1 rank of games to nonsense. We take those. Okay, I guess I have to farm YouTube content, so let's go over the deck. The regular Despia of Branded is too complicated for me, so I decided to just play Monkey Flip instead. But with Branded on top of it, pretty much what's the whole idea of the deck? Well, you play Eldlich, and then you do the Eldlich thing. You know, you use the Curse Outlet to search the Eldlich, or say, no, I don't need the Eldlich, I'm going to grab the Conquistador, or the Gold Land Forever, or the Hakiro to banish, or the Guardian to reduce. If you don't know what these cards do, this pops, this negates, and then you just draw Skill Drain, and then you win. Or you draw Rivalry, and then you hope you don't run up against a deck that only summons one type, and then you win. Or even if they do summon only one type, well, they're not going to summon zombies, so you just somehow turbo on Necroworld Banshee, and then get Zombie World on the field, and now they're zombie locked, so that means they can't play the game because you're the only person that's playing zombies. And then you do that, there could be only one, which is not so detrimental in this deck because we're playing a few different attributes. We have a little more on that later, but that's only, of course, when we don't have Zombie World on the field. But worst comes to worst, if we're ever cucked by either there could be only one or Rivalry of the Warlords, we just send them out of the field to the graveyard thanks to Eld Sussy, and then we're suddenly be able to play the game while the opponent is just like, can I do that too? And you're just like, no. Anyway, we also play counter traps galore because letting the opponent do anything is just the worst idea in the world, so don't let them do that. I also play Triple Dogmatic and Punishment because, hey, I could send it to the graveyard to pop something, or I could send Albaya to the graveyard to do something, but we'll talk about that in a moment. I mean, I think you already get the gist of what's going to happen with that. And then we play Imperm just because it's another good card, and being able to use that going second is pretty powerful. Being able to, like, stop Lebellion from being able to resolve its effect, being able to, like, stop other monsters from resolving their effects when you don't have to deal with a Wonder Griffin Rider tanking the negate is pretty nice. So it, like, puts us in a... It's like another trap that just, like, adds to the versatility of, like, the control aspect while just, like, allowing us to have an option going second. I wanted to play Lava Golem when I was initially playing it, but I just feel like with Branded being everywhere, Lava Golem doesn't, like, stop them from doing their most oppressive plays onto you. Same with things like Flues when you run into them occasionally. It's nice against, like, Halcadon combo, but, like, then you're just like, okay, well, what do I do against, like, the Brendans now? So that's kind of why I haven't been playing it. And I think, like, you could play other floodgates, such as, like, Gozen Match. Gozen Match, I feel like, isn't that great against, like, Brendan unless they, like, start off with, like, Rite of Abyssir, in which case you just flip the hell out of that and just stop them from being able to resolve the Draco back bounce. But other than that, I feel like it's kind of annoying. And it could be good against other decks, like, again, going first against, like, Tenyi, it could be really powerful against them, but I felt like it was less reliable. And even though Rivalry doesn't always, like, work against every matchup, at least there's the potential of making it work in every matchup because Zombie World will just lock most meta decks out of being able to play the game. So that's really nice. And so that's the whole Eldlich part. Now let's get to the new part, the fun part, and that's Brendan with the fusion. So we're just playing a tiny little Brendan package where we just play 3 Branded Fusion as well as 2 Fallen of Albaz. So we can then go ahead and use Branded Fusion to either summon Albion to send Fallen of Albaz, as well as Eldlich the Golden Lord to the graveyard to be able to then use the effect of Albion to be able to use itself, as well as the Fallen of Albaz to summon the Mirror Jade, which is a really good card. I'm sure you know. Not targeting banish, being able to go ahead and send another Albion to the graveyard to be able to get a search in the end phase, and being able to destroy all monsters after it gets destroyed on the opponent's side is pretty hot. So, or after it leaves the field, rather. Those are all really good things. But the real benefit for this deck is the fact that you could play, like, Toxic Eldritch stuff and also just, like, utilize Branded Fusion to turbo out getting Eldritch in the graveyard while getting yourself a really nice non-targeting banished boss monster on top of that. So that's pretty hot, and definitely, like, worth playing just for that in itself. You could also, instead of summoning the Albion, you could choose to go into the Lebellion instead. And what's nice about that is that you could go ahead and discard a card, which a lot of times that's not necessarily going to be to your benefit, but sometimes could be to your benefit. Like, you could discard an Eldritch that you want in the graveyard, or a Doom King Baller Jock that you want in the graveyard, or even, like, one of your Eldritch traps, so that you could then go ahead and use the Lebellion as well as your Fallen of Albaz to be able to summon the Mirror Jade that way. So it's more costly, but the benefit of that is that you could turbo out sending Necroworld Banshee to the graveyard, which allows you to then go ahead and just straight up say, hey, I have Zombie World now. So it's a nice way of being able to like get Zombie World quicker. The only other way you could guarantee getting Necroworld Banshee out sooner is having an Eldlich on the field and then resolving Sanguine to summon another zombie monster from the deck, which is also another reliable way of doing so. But this gives you a lot more versatility in being able to do it turn 1, which some matchups this could be just an FTK, like when they require certain types to be able to do their plays, like Flues, for example. And also, if you start with your Rivalry and Branded Fusion, then you just go ahead and say, I don't need my Eldlich, so I'm just going to send Necroworld Banshee to the graveyard, activate Zombie World, activate Rivalry of the Warlords, and then I'm just going to have a good time. And that's pretty much the whole idea there. And also, what you could do if you already have access to Zombie World, whether by having a Necroworld Banshee or a Zombie World in your hand, or if you happen to do the Lebellion play last turn, then you could just go ahead and use Branded Fusion to send Doom King Ballardrock to the graveyard instead. And you only need one Lebellion for this anyway, since we just use Lebellion. Lebellion returns itself as well as the other fusion material to the deck when doing so. So by just resolving Lebellion, you get itself as well as your Fallen of Albaz back to the deck. So you could then go ahead and use it again for the second Branded Fusion that you get, which you could easily get by using Mirror Jade to send Albion to the graveyard, so you could then grab yourself another Branded Fusion. It's like synergy or something. So it's really nice for like the grind when you already have like your Banshee into Zombie World set up, or just like for being able to say, hey, like here's another boss monster. And now if you establish having both Mirror Jade as well as Doom King Ballardrock on the field, then you now have 2 monsters that could non-targeting banish, which is ridiculous. Ballardrock will come back every standby phase when the field spell is up, which Zombie World is a field spell, and whenever your opponent's monsters that are zombies activate their effects, then you just negate them. Also, you could just decide to just respond to any of their zombie monster effects with a non-targeting banish. Zombie World turns all your opponent's monsters on the field and graveyards into zombies, so that's the synergy there. That's really nice. It's really powerful, and it's just another kind of like win condition, as well as ability to have added aggression. And again, Sanguine is another way for you to be able to turbo out Ballardrock, and then you could just do a lot of pressure with that. Once you have Ballardrock and Eldlich on the field as well, you could just link them off into a Vampire Sucker so that you could bring back Eldlich and then summon it as a 3500 beater. And then you know that your Ballardrock is going to come back into the standby phase of the next turn, and that's going to trigger Vampire Sucker's effect to allow you to draw a card, which will then allow you to trigger Ballardrock's effect to allow you to banish a monster non-targetably. That's really nice. It's great when it pops off. And so you'll sometimes start with Ballardrock in the hand, which is unfortunate, but you can always use Lebellion's effect to discard it. When you do so, and you send like the Necroworld Banshee to the graveyard, then you basically guarantee your full Zombie World setup right there. Or you could go ahead and return an Eldlich from your graveyard back to the hand, so that you could then go ahead, instead of summoning the Eldlich onto the field, you could keep it in the hand and summon Ballardrock instead as a 3800 beast that can't be destroyed by card effects until the end of the opponent's turn, which is really nice, because then you could keep the Eldlich in the hand, so that in the next turn, you could then just, or even this turn, depending on like when it got to the hand, you could just go ahead and send one of your spells or traps to the graveyard, ideally one of these. So you could then go ahead and say goodbye to one of your opponent's cards, and you're just womboing all over the place. It's insane. So, Dogmatic was just here for an additional pop. Like I said, we played the Elder Entities here. You only made room for 1, but you could probably play more copies as you see fit. And the extra deck space is tight, but also pretty flexible. Honestly, like, I played a lot of the extra deck was from when I was playing Super Poly. I like Super Poly in this deck, especially with like Zombie World being able to turn all monsters into like zombies, so you could then use 2 of your opponent's monsters to make Nether Soul Dragon, or you could even just like make Mud Dragon if your opponent controls like, let's say, an Appaloosa and Baron, which came up, or things like that, or like Boral and Savage Dragon, another Target monster with like a different attribute. Well, at that point, we'd be able to use Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, but yeah, you get the point. I found just like Super Poly was a little unreliable a lot of times. Like going first, I'd rather see another card, and going second, it was sometimes useful for breaking boards, and other times I'm just like, I'm discarding too many cards, and this feels really bad. So it's strong, and it could be really powerful as a board breaker, but I didn't feel like it was essential, and so I took out the Nether Soul. I kept the Eldlich Fusion, but honestly, you probably should take out the Eldlich Fusion, because there's like really no reason to play it. Just take this out. I was only playing it for Super Poly reasons, and I summoned it once against the mirror, funny enough, but it was not worth it. Honestly, it wasn't essential, and like The only good thing it's doing is giving me a really high attack target for Dogmatic Punishment, which actually came up where I had to destroy a Perskinion, the Despia Perskinion, so this was my only target that I could send to do so, I believe. Never mind, because you have Super Dreadnought Lieb, so don't even at me, just get rid of this already. I probably just kind of forgot to get rid of it, so you could probably just like play like something like a Link Spider, for example, or you could play another copy of Elder Entity and something like that, or you could play like the Ignister that is a synchro, so that you could go ahead and just be like, goodbye, you're done. So that's probably how I would build the deck. Or you could play like Nightmare Phoenix or all that, you know, the usual stuff. But yeah, so we play the Elder Entities as our punishment targets. We play Starving Venom Fusion Dragon initially as super poly targets, but you could theoretically summon it off of like the effect of the Albion as well as the Lebellion. You wouldn't really want to summon it off Albion in most situations, but you theoretically could. Same with like the Predator Plant Dracostapelia. It's just like an option that you could go into. Again, it was more so viable when we were playing Super Poly because there's like a lot of players playing like Despia, so that gives you like an option to be able to go ahead and like use your opponent's monsters more frequently because they more frequently control fusions, so that you could make Dracostapelia and then have yourself negate on top of that. We can go into Titanclad, which is nice as well with the Burn Fusion in case we ever needed to just like summon a big body, because you could also send Eldlich to summon Titanclad, so it's always an option instead of going into Albion when you need to mill Eldlich, or even Baller Drock, but you don't want to go ahead and use the effect of Lebellion. It's something to keep in mind. It becomes big and it's nice. We don't play any like we don't play any Dogmatica cards, but theoretically you can use this and like get yourself like one copy of Ecclesia, so that whenever you resolve like Dogmatica Punishment, you can then go ahead and send Titanclad to the graveyard to like in the end phase special summon for an Ecclesia, so that you can then go ahead and search on the opponent's end phase, for example, a second Dogmatica Punishment, so that you have that ready to set on the next turn. So it's like something that could be like synergy. I just didn't play it personally, but it's definitely something that could be considered. I personally just wanted to go for as little monsters as possible, because seeing these as is in the opening hand made me annoyed. So, and of course Albion and Lebellion's how you get to Mirror Jade while setting up your graveyard with the cards that you want. And then Mirror Jade is a boss monster, and it's great. And then we play Vert Anaconda. I'm sure you all already know, but any two monsters that are effect monsters allows you to go into the Vert Anaconda, so you can go ahead and send Branded Fusion, so you could use the Vert Anaconda as well as the Fallen of albaz in your deck to summon Mirror Jade directly. It's nice, and it's cool. So another thing you could do. And then Super Dreadnought, Gustav Max, as well as the lead rank up whenever we have two level 10s, aka just our two Eldritches, which doesn't come up as often in this build because we're not playing like the Heavenly Prison, so we don't get as many situations where we're playing like where we get two level 10s on the field, but it's still a good card to have in general. Vampire Sucker is our target to go into like whenever we have just like a bunch of Eldritch cards that we want to get off the field, and allows us to do so even when we're rivalry locked, for example. And it's just a really nice card. So that's the deck. It's really strong, and it's really toxic, and y'all love toxicity, right? I was playing second loop initially, but I feel like it never really came up for me. I feel like there are situations where it could come up where like you have two Branded Fusions, but they like negate your lube, and now it's like stuck and you're not able to recycle it. So like second lube could definitely be viable to like make sure that like you're able to at least make value off of like that second Lebellion, for example, to like be able to get your plays going while sending like a follow-up monster. Like let's say the first Lebellion you sent the Banshee, and the second Lebellion you could send the Doom King Baller Drog, but you know, usually you're not reliant on resolving two Lebellion effects, and in situations where you would be, you're able to just like use the second Lebellion as long as the first Lebellion was negated and was able to successfully return itself to the deck. For any situation that you could send Lebellion, you could also a lot of times do the same with Albion. So like that's why we kind of prioritize the Albion, since like Eldritch is a boss monster anyway, and I usually only prioritize like the Banshee mill or like the Baller Rock mill if I already have Zombie World access via Banshee or Zombie World itself. But I only prioritize the Banshee mill if we have like rivalry, or if our hand is such that we benefit from the discard and we're just like in a comfy situation, like we have access to Eldritch via like a Sanguine, and we could go into like sending like Necroworld Banshee, and we have like a lot of other like good cards in the graveyard to be able to benefit. I like to just have like Zombie World on the field to just like have the potential of being able to lock out somebody that's like, even without rivalry, that just like has like a need to use certain types of types to be able to get their plays going. Like a lot of Sword Soul level 8 Synchros, for example, require worm monsters to be able to do things, or like a Hauki Fibrax into Mecha Phantom Beast requires them to control machine monsters only. So that's kind of like the idea of that. But yeah, so something like this. It's a good deck. And it's a nice different way of utilizing strategy while also still having a bit of power. It gets a little bit of the aggression from Branded while keeping the control from Eldlich. I was initially playing Glow Bloom, just because if you have like Zombie World or Banshee access into Zombie World, you could then go ahead and use Branded Fusion to send the Lebellion, to then send the Glow Bloom, to then allow you to directly summon the Doom King Bolt or Drock from the deck. But a lot of times that wasn't necessary, and that's just like one more card that I don't want to see in my hand that I'd rather just like replace with a power card like Solemn Judgment, or the good card Skill Drain. Yeah, that's the deck. I liked it a lot. It was pretty fun.